My thing when I first started getting into fragrance used to be going around all of the old pharmacies as part of agelessness, of smelling these scents that we were familiar with in previous parts of our life. I think then the challenge becomes, how do you navigate that if you're new to fragrance?
If you've heard of the Longevity Bible Lifespan by Professor David Sinclair, you know that living well is more important than just living long. In fact, this show is dedicated to the science of beauty, wellness, and longevity. That's why I'm so thrilled to partner with Melrose Future Lab for Season 9 of the Ageless Radiance Club podcast. Future Lab is Australia's first supplement range focused on extending not just your lifespan, but your health span. Available exclusively at Chemist Warehouse, these affordable and science-backed supplements are the key to aging well. Welcome to the Ageless Radiance Club podcast, where we explore the fascinating intersections between beauty, longevity, and wellness. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the captivating world of fragrances with a guest who brings unmatched expertise and passion to the subject. Clayton is the Evaluation and Communications Manager at Fragrances of the World, the definitive guide to all things scent. Mentored by Michael Edwards, an icon of the fragrance industry, Clayton transitioned from an award-winning career in fashion writing to the world of perfumery. He's completed his studies at the prestigious Grasse Institute of Perfumery, and in this episode, we'll explore how fragrance has evolved from the golden age of designer perfumes and bold celebrity scents to the rise of niche brands. From clean fragrances to functional fragrances and everything in between. Fragrance is now even being touted as a connection between wellness and longevity. And as we uncover the rise of functional fragrances and the growing popularity of skin scents, you're going to have all your questions answered. Whether you're curious about how to find your perfect fragrance or interested in the most exciting new brands, get ready for a beautiful conversation that's unforgettable. I'm so happy to have you on the show. Welcome. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
It is, and I'm excited. I love, and I don't know how, like speaking with my European friends, it's sort of strange for them that we're in summer. But for me, it just Christmas and summer makes so much sense, and I'm so excited to have like this warm weather and like be by the ocean and doing barbecues and just celebrating this time of year with everyone. I think it's really a special
I
time.
wanted to have you on the show for a really long time. We first met when we were seated next to each other at a Creed Windflowers launch at the Opera House at Ben Long Restaurant. And I just remember meeting you and having this professional crush on you. And the only other person that I have two other people I have a professional crush on in the fragrance industry. The other one is Michael Edwards, who you know and we love,
Yes.
and Roger Dove, who
Ah,
I had the honor of interviewing, I want to say 15 years ago.
wow.
And yes, so you joined that lofty rank of professional fragrance crush.
Like, and it's so crazy for me if I backtrack. So a couple of, I guess, points on my timeline that I can share is one, two of my first books when I became interested in fragrance. One was Roger Dove's book, which was amazing because it's that beautiful journey that takes you through decade by decade, and you really get a sense of the culture of the time and the fragrances of the time and how they related to the culture. And I really love this. And then, of course, Michael Edwards' Perfume Legends, which in a similar way sort of
The
really
Bible.
highlights, these amazing moments in the history of perfumery. So these were two of my first books that sort of helped me with my education with fragrance. And so the fact that I now work with Michael Edwards and very familiar with Roger Dove's work is, I don't know, sometimes I have to pinch myself. But I met you, the thing that I remember of my first meeting with you, and you probably don't remember because it was before my time at Fragrances of the World, but I was actually in the launch event for Goldfield and Banks, and it was
Yes,
in Point Piper, I
I
believe.
remember the apartment in Point Piper.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you were there, and so I was like, wow, who is this, kind of fabulous woman who just, clearly knows perfumery inside out, and that was my first meeting of you.
I'm so pleased we found each other again. When we were seated together at the Windflowers launch,
Mhm.
I confessed to you my a secret crush that I had on a fragrance, and it was Declaration by Cartier. And it's a men's fragrance, but it just left this indelible mark in my heart. It was a time I think I was 27. I just met my first ex-husband, which is a funny way of talking about it, but he brought that fragrance back for me after a trip to London, and it was just so bold and different, had that top notes of citrus and cardamom and bergamot. And I was telling you how much I loved it. But it had changed. They changed the formula. And you had the original in your archives and you posted it to me.
Which I'm now thinking, oh, I should have actually kept a little bit of that bottle because
I will keep it for you. I've got it. Don't you worry. I will look after it. I mean, you can dram it. Um, but the reason that I guess that our conversation was so beautiful and the connection around fragrance is so wonderful, which is worth having, is that fragrance and the olfactory kind of experience is what I always say, the ultimate time machine. If you want to feel young, if you want to feel ageless, go grab a bottle of fragrance that your mum or dad wore when you were young, your first love wore, your best friend wore, or even you wore, and you are literally seated in a time capsule that instantly transports you to another decade, another time, another version of yourself. And to me, the exploration of that concept in the context of agelessness and beauty and rejuvenation is so exciting and so fun. It would be remiss not to talk about it.
I love that. I love that so much. And talking about this idea of scent and memory. So I was a competitive badminton player when I was a kid growing up. And then later in life, so after COVID, I went back to badminton, hadn't played in sort of like 20 years. And it's just so amazing, the muscle memory and just remembering sort of how to hold the racket and sort of the different types of shots and how you move around the court, footwork, all of that sort of comes back. But really interesting that my body isn't 16 anymore. Mentally, I'm doing all the things, and then my body's like, "What?" My reaction time is, so much. There's so much lag compared to when I was younger. But with perfume, it's just really, and I'm sure you would have looked at the science of it, of how the part of the brain that is associated with smell and perceiving smell is this ancient part of the brain, which is really connected to emotion and memory, and it's completely bypassing the neocortex, the sort of the logical part of our brain, which is responsible for language, which is why some people find it so hard to describe what it is they're smelling. But we just have this sort of really instinctual, emotional experience when we smell something. I'd never thought of that, but I really like your comment there of actually, as part of agelessness, of smelling these scents that we were familiar with in previous parts of our life. And it almost takes up, not the physical body, but the mental body. We're back. We're that age. We're a kid again.
We're
All these.
sexy, like, we're falling in love. Like, I have two fragrances from Azadine Alaya, the Alaya fragrances, the white one and I can't remember the name, the one in the black bottle and the one in the white bottle. And they're so evocative of this
Yeah.
wonderful romance that I had.
Wow.
And I like sometimes have to not smell it because I think whenever I'm just right there again, it's
Yeah.
just so transportive. And it's not even that I think of the other person, I remember who I am, that
Yeah.
version of myself. And I think that understanding that when you're buying or giving perfume,
Mm.
it gives you this sense of like a renewed sense of importance of how fundamentally transportative and responsible you are when you make a gift of fragrance or when you purchase a fragrance for yourself. And I think, it's a time of like broader and broader and broader fragrance collections. And I have a broad collection as well. Signature fragrances, fragrances that celebrate a moment in time, like your wedding fragrance or a holiday fragrance, or the smell of someone that you love, like your grandmother or someone that's dear to you. They're big things. It's more than a bottle of perfume.
It is. And, the other thing that I really love about that statement is that it transcends this idea of cost. So, this idea that we have to, I guess, spend a lot of money on perfume. I don't know if you want to remind me of my great grandmother. Then it's Lontheric. It's an old Lontheric fragrance,
Lanthric, I know Lanthric, yeah.
which she wore, and you can buy that probably in a discount pharmacy for next to nothing. So that to give me that moment with my great grandmother costs like nothing. It's not about having to spend a lot of money to have a better experience with perfume. I think I like that.
But that's so true. That's so true. So my love of perfume started when I was really young. I was 5 years old. I was born in France, and um, my parents love fragrance, and I'm Iranian by nationality, and Iranians love fragrance. And one of the big jokes is that, like, if you're ever dating an Iranian, the fragrance comes before the person. Like, we like it strong, we like it definitive, and we like it as a signature. But fragrance was always a really big part of my life. And we left France when I was about 3. We moved to Iran, and my dad would still travel to and from France. And I remember he came back from a business trip. He's a geologist, and he brought me a bottle of Karl Lagerfeld Chloe in the parfum. He gave me, I was a 5-year-old who received a parfum of Chloe Lagerfeld by Lagerfeld. I felt so sophisticated, so honored and grown up by this gift of fragrance. And the reason my dad had given me this fragrance is that I had this habit of, he had a pocket square. It was a Christian Dior tie and pocket square that he had. And he would always douse it with Eau Sauvage before he went on his trips. And I would have that as my, like, blankie. So he would say to me, you know, if you miss me, you can smell this and I'll be back soon. And so he always knew how much I love perfume. So he bought me my own perfume from Paris. And so I fell in love with fragrances really, really early. And I like all fragrances, you know, like you were talking about L'Entrique. I remember Le Jardin by, who did Le Jardin? Was it, it was like one of those pharmacy fragrances. I remember what else were there was that whole range of fragrances that, you know, Discount Pharmacy had. I remember having a drama teacher who smelled like one of those fragrances, and I loved her, so I loved that perfume. My mum wore Diorella. My aunties wear Diorissimo. I graduated to the original Miss Dior fragrances, and then, you know, I've had my love affairs with the Givenchy Amoureige because I was a traveler for Parfum Givenchy. That was my first job while I was at university. And then, you know, you change, and now I've got like a little collection of fragrances. But I love perfume, and I love giving perfume, and I love getting perfume.
Yes. Yeah. I'm the same. I'm the same, and very fortunate that I'm in a situation where my job is to literally smell perfume, and so I smell a lot of it. So it's always, yeah, I always count myself as lucky being able to explore, as you probably did, through those jobs, the wide range of fragrances that are out there, and I never get tired of smelling fragrances.
I always say I lived through the era of the Elizabeth Taylor Diamonds collection, and I can still smell it did not burn my olfactory sense. I want to ask you, I want to go back to the earlier start where we were talking about the evolution from, the classic designer fragrances, then the cult of the celebrity fragrances, and now we're really in the era of niche fragrances. Can you share with us the difference between niche fragrances and l'artisan fragrances?
There's, and this is really interesting because I gave a talk in Milan earlier this year at Essence, so Fragrances of the World, where we've been going to this trade show for even before I worked for the company, and we always give a presentation there. So I was giving a presentation on olfactive trends and things that are happening in the industry, and so I had a few slides where I just sort of took a moment to talk about the definition of niche, or really questioning it, because honestly there's no clear definition of what is niche, and now more than ever, because a lot of brands are coming into niche with the aspiration of becoming the next thing that's, the next Byredo or the next Jo Malone. So the intention has sort of changed. But originally for me, niche was the space that was separated from the mainstream. Often it came from people who were working in the industry for big brands like L'Oreal or Estee Lauder, and for them to sort of think, this is the industry, but I want to do something different. And so they were deliberately moving away from the mainstream and creating these brands that were small, that were artisanal, that were really making creativity their focus. And the way they were doing that, so they were really rebelling against the celebrity sense. So often, if you look at niche fragrances, it's a very generic bottle. There's a big focus on the ingredients or the juice, what's inside the bottle, rather than a celebrity endorsement or a marketing campaign around the fragrance. So that's where niche started. And that naturally, I think, raised the quality of the product because people were investing more money in the juice. And so there was a lot of ingredients that were being used that you couldn't use in more commercial forms of perfumery because either there wasn't the supply of, tons of a certain raw material to be produced at that scale, or it was just too expensive. And so that's where niche started. And then you had the luxury brands, which sort of saw that industry growing, and because they had the know-how and the finance behind them, then we sort of saw there was almost like a niche element that came into the luxury brands. So we're thinking of Les Exclusives de Chanel, Christian Dior has the collection privé. Even Tom Ford has the private blend collection, which is sort of a more elevated, exclusive part of
As
the Tom
it's rattling
Ford.
these off, I'm thinking I've bought into every single one of these. And
Yeah,
Galan, I love the Galan
right.
collection.
Yeah,
God,
yeah.
it's my
And
favorite of those.
so that's sort of where that began to happen. And now I'm finding niches is it's actually the bigger part. If I put my fragrances of the world hat on and the work that I do with Michael Edwards, and we're really analyzing the industry and what's coming in. And it used to be that niche was literally a niche. It was a small part of a bigger industry. Now niche fragrances are the biggest part of what's being launched. Because it's easy, these brands are agile, it's easy for an entrepreneur to kind of go, okay, let me do a collection, launch, stay small, but, be present in the industry. So there's this huge, both vertical and horizontal boom, I think, globally for niche.
I have a great update to share from Melrose Future Lab. Hormonal health is a vital hallmark of aging and longevity. And whether you're navigating perimenopause or menopause, Melrose Future Lab's new ultra-complex supplements are here to support you. Backed by clinical research and using advanced technology for effective absorption, these formulations are designed to provide relief through every phase. Find them exclusively at Chemist Warehouse. Always read the label and follow the directions for use.
Which means that it's an exciting time because there's something for everyone, I think. That's probably what I'd sort of say about niche is that if you want uber luxury niche, and we're thinking things like Roger Dove, where if you want to go to Harrods and drop, a couple of £1,000 on a bottle of perfume, and you can, then sure, there's a product there for you. Or if you want to, I don't know, go to some part of the US where there's someone distilling herbs in their, on their farm and then bottling that and doing something really, kind of quirky and artisanal. That exists as well. Or there's sort of more of these fashion brands. There's a lot that I'm seeing I was recently in Berlin and Amsterdam, and there's some really cool, these cities are known for their creativity and flair in terms of design. And I think that's sort of bleeding and filtering into the perfume industry as well. So there's some really cool brands there that are sort of more, if you're acne wearing, sort of streetwear connoisseur, then there's a brand for you there as well. So I think it's really cool. It's a fun time to be involved in perfume.
It's a really fun time to be a consumer of perfume as well. And I think that one of the things that I appreciate it, I think, the demographic that I kind of fit into is we're Gen Xers, and so we were part of the big bold fragrance movement. We lived through Opium, we lived through Lulu, Giorgio Beverly Hills. I went to Michael Edwards's recent American fragrance book
Yeah,
launch, which is so fascinating. I absolutely love that book. I
yeah,
actually love a lot of these big bold American fragrances. I didn't realize how many I really adored
right.
you know, and I like that style because,
Mm,
I'm Gen X and
mm,
they were big booming moments. If you wanted to be the older girl or a bit more sophisticated than your age, you would gravitate towards these bold fragrances. And, Calvin Klein really had that enormous moment with
mm.
Eternity, Obsession, TK1.
Yeah,
We were all part of that. But I think what's nice post celebrity fragrance, post even designer fragrance, is that the launch and the advent of the rise and rise of niche fragrances, it is a return to that kind of you're ahead of the pack. You can lead with something different. And I think that, you know, you get to an age and a stage where you don't want to smell like your daughter and you don't want to smell like every one of your friends. I want to walk into a restaurant or into a meeting and I want to smell like me. And I think niche fragrances create an opportunity for that individual signature profile. And I think that that's quite exciting for an older consumer who just doesn't want to be exactly the same as everyone else in the room or in the nightclub, as used to be the case, like when you walked in and everyone wore Lulu, all of us, all at once.
It's funny though, because, the downside of that is that we're not having these sort of culture defining moments with a singular. I mean, sure, you could argue that maybe fragrances like
Baccarat Rouge,
or Santal 33 or Aventus,
100%.
captured the cultural sort of zeitgeist of that decade, and that when we smell those, we'll have that same reaction that you just had to say Lulu, 20, 30 years down the track. But it is this thing that people are much more individual and there's much more out there, so people are able to explore. I think then the challenge becomes, how do you navigate that if you're new to fragrance?
Yes. And that's what you're here for. You are our navigator. You are our Sherpa through the mountain of niche fragrance.
Yeah, and I think many people have sort of taken up that task, and like a lot of the influencers as well on TikTok. Their role, I see, is really, giving recommendations, and those are sort of more personal. Whereas ours is, much more driven from olfactive classification. Whereas, you have these people on TikTok who are so passionate about fragrance and have their followers, which sort of, there'll be a value alignment with, so typically people that are attracted to that person because they see a part of themselves in them will really respect their recommendations. And so I think that's really cool. And yeah, but I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we have now, is just about, I don't know, it's for me, I love wine, but I'm certainly no connoisseur, and I can order fine, give me a menu in Australia and fine, send me to Europe, even in France. I'm always fascinated and love how French people can just like read that menu and kind of go, okay, no, but this, this appellation, no, and this year, oh, that was a good year, and oh, I'm feeling like I'm in the mood for this, so therefore I'm going to drink this. And I think like I would love to see consumers be able to have those conversations about fragrance in the same
Yes, that's a
way.
great analogy.
Yeah.
I like that.
And
That
there's
discernment, you mean?
that experience as well
Mm,
of having grown up. If you grow up in France, then you've been drinking from a young age, and not drinking like we do in Australia, but you've been
mm.
exposed to wine, and your parents have cultured you and taught you. We don't have that sort of background in fragrance. Partly due, I'd say, the brands have some accountability here, because fragrance marketing is typically being, let's not get too technical, let's just make it fun, and
Totally.
let's keep the consumer uneducated, really.
And mystified. I think the industry was all about, the mysterious
Yeah,
accords. They didn't want to point out key ingredients, or it was just like, "Ooh, ooh."
yeah. It is. That's
Something that you
changing.
said is really interesting to me, that you were talking about experience
Mhm,
and an exposure, I would say, you were
mhm.
also talking to as well. And one of the things that I'm a little bit, well, it's not for me to be worried about, but I guess I scratch my head with is the next generation of fragrance consumers. Whilst there's this enormous opportunity for discovery, and even young boys, teenage boys are really fascinated with fragrance for the first time that I've been aware of, where, they really are loved because of TikTok, because of social media. They're discovering fragrances, they're interested in it, they're curious about it. But I do think that at the same time, there's this glut of dupes and there's a glut of cheap synthetic fragrances that mimic fine fragrances. I don't mean to be disparaging, but and I've worn these fragrances before because my daughter's worn them. But Sol de Janeiro, if that's your exposure to fine fragrance, it's very different to me getting my bottle of Karl Lagerfeld Chloe at 5. Mid to late teens, all you know of fragrance are these mass, heavily synthetic, smells like, sort of is close to the cousin of Baccarat Rouge. You never experience the unadulterated pleasure of a beautifully composed fragrance. And
Yeah.
that makes me a bit sad. It's like wearing, like, when we grew up, like it was the body sprays, Impulse and Norska. They were fun until you were about 9, but then you wanted to graduate.
Yeah. It's again that challenge of the industry hasn't properly educated or allowed, or sort of opened its doors and welcomed the consumer in to really understand what it is. So perfume is this mystical thing for many people. So it's no wonder that if I was to, show you a Hermes Birkin, and then hold it next to something that was bought, on the back streets on a holiday somewhere in some other country, in the market, you can point out really clearly the quality of the leather, the stitching, the accuracy, like all of these pieces. But not only that, the experience of purchasing the Birkin in the store, that whole experience and the journey that comes with that purchase. And then also the aftercare that sort of followed on from that. That is completely streets away from the counterfeit, the fake that was purchased in the market somewhere else. People can clearly see that. But with perfume, because it's still this mystical thing, people don't really know the difference between a beautiful rose absolute that's been grown and distilled in grass or extracted in grass versus phenylethyl alcohol, which is a singular molecule, which is about less than $100 a kilo, and can sort of give you a sense of something that smells like rose, but not all of those, 300 plus molecules that are in a natural rose absolute that's been skillfully crafted and distilled
I
for a
know. I think of this all the time. And I think of this same but different mentality where everyone, I don't know whether it's because the economy is a little bit shaky at the moment and people really love a bargain and appreciate getting something that feels like, looks like, smells sort of like
Mm.
a more expensive cousin. But I think that's dulling your senses and it's dulling that experience and that as you were saying, experience and exposure to something that's fine, similar to wine. If you grow up drinking a cask wine,
Mhm.
and that is your palate, the transition to beautiful vintages is going to be hard, and you might even miss the nuance of why they're special. So I'm wondering if, one of the things I'm really passionate about, you'll laugh, is I take Lily on, my daughter who is 14. I take her on little fragrance safaris. And one of our new favorite places, which I allow her to come with me to, is the Libertine Perfumeries.
Yeah.
And I took her, I dragged her in the first time. And now she will ask me and she'll say, look, can we go and can we just focus on one brand today? So she the first couple of times we went, she loved it so much. It was like Wonderland. She couldn't believe it. But now she also understands that it's a lot and it's too much to experience all at once. So we'll, go and we'll say, okay, we're going to look at Nishane today, or we're going to look at Creed today, or we're going to look at Parfum de Mali today. And that's become like, makes me so happy. I feel like a mother that's taught her daughter how to like, tie her shoelaces and eat with her knife and fork. Like I've really given her a developmental step.
That's so amazing. And I was speaking with a brand in London, and they just come back from a tour with their distributors in the US. But they were saying how they were so surprised. They were seeing these father and son combos doing exactly that in the perfumeries in the US. And, we were
Nice.
sort of talking about it, and we were saying how, as a kid growing up, as a boy, typically to be you and your dad in the workshop, working on a car or doing up a car or learning carpentry. But now there's sort of a group of these young boys that their fathers are wearing fragrance. And of course, as a kid, you don't have money to buy, beautiful fragrances like this. So they're always seeing what the dad's wearing and borrowing from the dads. And then the dad's like, okay, well, let's go to the department store, or the perfumery, and let's go and smell fragrances together. And that's sort of how fathers and sons are hanging out at the
It's
moment.
a great way to hang out. I've taken Lily to Le Labo. She loves that experience. Le Labo and Bondi have been so kind to us, really beautiful. It's a joyful experience. Joe Malone is lots of fun. It's very unintimidating. You can do the layering. That's definitely a joy. Do you know another place I like to go for fragrances? Is Ultra Beauty with Chemist Warehouse, because I actually find that a very unintimidating destination and they have a lot of the old fragrances and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
makes me so happy. I go and buy, the 30 mils of things I
Mhm.
used to wear when I was at uni or at high school, and I
Wow.
introduced them to Lily and they have all, designer
Yeah,
fragrances, the
yeah.
new niche fragrances. They've got quite an impressive collection. But it's a nice place to go because it's got, to me, it's got things side by side, things that you don't normally find in a department store or a perfumery.
Yeah, I love it too. I'm a big fan. Always have been. Like my thing when I first started getting into fragrance used to be going around all of the old pharmacies because often they'd have bottles that are
Yeah.
collecting dust on the shelf, and often if you're into formulation changes and finding vintage versions of so like all of the old Guerlains. I remember um, being in Cairns. I was up in Cairns and went into this old pharmacy, and they had all of the old like gold packaging for Guerlain still, and I was just like, oh my god,
Heaven.
buying
Did you
everything.
buy it all?
Yes, yeah, I did. I did. And had the same experience in Hong Kong. I was in Kowloon and coming back from a holiday and went in and they just like literally had everything. And I was just like, my God, this is heaven. So I love pharmacy, like shopping in pharmacies for fragrances. And then absolutely have to agree, Chemist Warehouse for me, like I love a bargain. I mean, who doesn't? And I love going in and sort of seeing, what's on sale and like, oh, like I wouldn't have bought that normally, but hey, today it's like what's $50 out of my bank account to have a bottle of something that I wore in high school, or
Yeah.
as a university student. Like let me go down that memory lane and
Yeah,
enjoy.
let me get in my time capsule and be, 19 again. It's a very inexpensive way to like have a boost of dopamine.
I love it. Yeah, I bought from Chemist Warehouse recently cool water. I was just like, I really feel like
Yes.
wearing cool
I
water.
nearly bought Isamiyaki the other day, but I bought Eternity instead.
I've bought Eternity for Men, yeah, which I love. I love, yeah, all of those fragrances. That's kind of my,
Eternity for Men is catnip because it literally reminds you of the first boy you ever had a crush on. Because
yeah,
for sure he stole his dad's or his older brother's
yeah,
Eternity and
yeah.
doused it on so heavily ahead of your school dance. And like everyone and everything smelled like Eternity.
Yeah, I would, like the memory I have associated with that is my sister's fashion magazines and all of the scent strips because, like I wouldn't, as a young, kind of teenage boy, you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to go to the department store and go through the women's perfume section. And so my life was sort of flicking through Vogue and Harper's and smelling in
It's true.
Cosmopolitan, smelling the scent strips and yeah, it's so my memory when I smell those fragrances, it's not just the fragrance, but it's the paper and the ink and the
Wow.
smell of the paper magazine that we unfortunately don't get as much anymore. Because I was traveling with a friend on the weekend. He's like, we're in the airport. He's like, who buys magazines these days? And then next minute he's buying a cooking magazine for Christmas inspiration. So yeah, I love magazines
Yeah,
as
me
well.
too. I like magazines. I like them too. I like tactile things.
Mm.
I want to talk to you about niche within niche. I was
Mm.
very, very lucky in my previous life before being in publishing and pure kind of media. I
Mhm.
was in distribution. I had a distribution business called Brand Makers, and I imported and distributed 30 beauty and skincare and fragrance brands into Australia. And four of the brands that I launched L'Artisan Parfumé into Australia,
Wow.
which was a joy, an unparalleled joy of my life, and like truly a highlight of my career. Penhaligon's fragrances I launched, La Perla fragrances,
Right.
and also Ferrari fragrances, which
Right.
were crazy and big and like extremely popular. Um, and there were some good juices in amongst that
Mm.
kind of because that was a mass brand, but
Yeah.
a couple of them were great fragrances. And that was just like that was an unparalleled joy in my life. Like to be able
Mm.
to meet the perfumers, to be part of the launch and but it was a really different time. I want to say this was about 16, 17 years ago when I launched those. It was really, really the only other niche fragrances at the time in the market. I can't even remember. Maybe Galan would be considered niche. Like some of the Galan fragrances were considered very premium, ultra niche. I think the less exclusive were here because I remember I used to wear Chanel 22 a long time ago. So I want to say they were. But, in Australia, Annick Goutal would have been a niche fragrance. There weren't that many.
No.
And now there are so many, so very many. And one of the subcategories that I'm interested in, obviously, that kind of aligns with the theme of ageless, is this functional fragrance category, which straddles the world of well-being, pleasure. And we've seen some big launches in that category. Bella Hadid has launched what is essentially an elevated essential oil brand that is part skincare, part fragrance. Charlotte Tilbury has launched her collection, which are in collaboration with International Flavors and Fragrances,
No.
Fragrance Cube.
Yeah.
And that's kind of mood boosting, libido boosting, you know,
Yeah.
pheromone boosting, everything boosting. So I think that category is interesting. I'm wondering, what do you think of that category as someone who's a professional, evaluator and categorizer of fragrances?
I think it's absolutely an exciting space because, as we were saying before, fragrance is sort of really just sat in the space where it's mystical, no one quite understands it. And I think the oil houses, so people, companies like IFF and Givaudan and Firmenich, who are sort of producing a bulk of the fragrances in the world, their goal with getting the juice to the bottle for the client, whether it's a designer or a celebrity, whatever, has really just been about how do I respond to the creative brief? Like, does the fragrance match the story? And when we do consumer testing, people will say, oh, this is something that I want to wear. I think now there's so many more layers, and the oil houses are doing and paying a lot more for R&D. So people like Givaudan in New York to create their fragrances with the perfumer Rodrigo Flores Roux. And when you go to their sort of space, it's sort of like a showroom, they have the fragrances that you smell on different environments. So you smell the fragrance on glass, on these sort of glass sculptures, then you smell it on
Oh,
wood, then you smell it on paper, and then eventually you smell it on your own skin. And so they're really into this idea of, fragrance can change depending on the environment and the application. So I think these new products are really interesting because we know what perfume and alcohol smells like, but if you put it in different, mixing it in different ways and with different concentrations and oils, I'm thinking like people like Amouage that have the Atars, which are 100%
yeah.
oil, and also their latest collection, which they've co-distilled and macerated the fragrance in sandalwood chips, and then they also macerate their alcohol, their blending alcohol, in oak barrels. So there's all these new ways that people are experimenting to add
Mm.
difference to their product. I think it's cool.
I also, it's interesting that you should say that because I remember with L'Artisan Parfumeur, the amber ball
Yeah,
was one
yeah.
of their signature products, and it
Mm,
was carved wood, and I think it was
mm.
teak. No, what was it?
Is it
Amber.
terrible?
It was teak. It was amber. No, no,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
The fragrance crystals inside it were amber, and
yeah,
I can't remember what the wood was, but it was like
yeah,
gorgeous, and it
yeah.
was, a new way of experiencing home fragrance.
Mm,
And I'm going to drop in something that I think,
yeah.
I don't want to give it too much attention because it's kind of like it was a stunt, but I think it was
Mhm.
clever and I think it was pivotal. Is when Goop and Gwyneth Paltrow
Mm,
launched the fragrance, This Smells Like My Vagina.
mm,
I think that the disruptive nature of and the intimate nature of scent and fragrance, that conversation, I think, possibly paved the way for what we're seeing in that space now. I think that, if there hadn't been that huge handbrake disruptor and that really viral moment, maybe we wouldn't be talking about a fragrance by Charlotte Tilbury called More Sex.
yeah.
So I think that, fragrance, and there's another one called Jasmine and Cigarettes, or there's a couple in the niche fragrance that are pretty raunchy and pretty out there or disruptive. And I think that it's kind of part of the as you say, it's the zeitgeist, like once you kind of go there, once you embrace, the changes in language, the changes in what's appropriate and isn't appropriate, where the gender fluidity is now completely commonplace. Like, we don't call it unisex, we just say genderless. Like, it's just whoever wants to smell like this can smell like this. It's no longer masculine or feminine to smell like vanilla or leather. You can choose, you can wear both, whoever you are, wherever you are. And I
Yeah.
think that is part of fragrance's role in kind of capturing the essence of culture and the essence of mood. I don't know what comes first, but I think it's interesting.
It is, it is. And I was having this conversation the other day um, with someone, I forget the context, but we were talking about perfume through the decades. And I was sort of saying, I think because we were talking about some of the classics, and this is sort of pre Diorissimo. So if you've got Diorissimo, but then just before that, you've got obviously Diorella, but then you have things like Dior and these sort of really leathery Chypre. And even if you look at the original Miss Dior, it's quite masculine.
I love the
And
original Miss Dior,
yeah, me too, me too.
and all of the subsequent Miss Diors make me want to cry.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a, I think, perfection in terms of a collection and an evolution. How that all came together with Edmund Rodnitska is just amazing. But it was fascinating for me because if you look at what women were doing and what they were wearing at the time, and sort
Yes.
of those fragrances like from Germaine Cellier, like amazing perfumer, and one of the only female perfumers of the 50s. But a lot of her fragrances at the time were very austere. They were very like leathery. If you think of like Bondi or Bandit from Robert Piguet, it's this like really
Oh,
hardcore, kind of like almost dominatrix leather fragrance, which in today's environment would read completely as being probably a masculine fragrance. But at the
yeah.
time, women were performing the work of men because all the men went to war, and so it sort of fragrance has this ability to really capture the
That's
time.
what I think.
You
That's
know,
what I think, and I find that really I find that really beautiful and historic about fragrance. Back to the topic of you guiding us on how we might, because it is, after all, the season of fragrance. This is the time to give and get beautiful fragrances, and I want to talk about discovery sets and scent libraries because I think that Australia is very lucky. It's probably the first time that I remember that so many brands have got that opportunity for consumers to discover more than just one perfume. And I've got a few
Really?
here that I wanted to pull out, and I would love for your comment. And I've got one that you told me is your pick of the bunch. And I have to say, it's one of my favorite things as well. And this is Goldfield and Banks Discovery Collection, an Australian blockbuster niche fragrance that is really performing so incredibly well by our beautiful friend Dimitri, who has turned Australia into a global hotspot for fragrance.
Completely agree. I think, in my travels and time abroad, it's the one brand where I get the most questions on when people say, "Oh, you live in Australia, like Australian fragrance, Goldfield and Banks. Have you heard of this brand?" I was like, "Yes, yes, we all know and love Dimitri." But I love this because, again, I'm so excited for the summer, which I said at the beginning, and I'm just happy to be in Australia and spend my summer here and in the holiday season. And I just love being out in nature and exploring the landscape and the smells and sort of all of the things that come with the Australian summer. And I think this is just a nice way to encapsulate all of those emotions in one sample set where,
And I think
Dimitri.
it's also so cute because you've got the blotters too, which
Mm,
most
they
discovery
don't.
sets do not come with.
Yeah.
And this is such a great addition to this because it gives you that sense of, your own little perfume shop or little lab. And you can try it here first and let it settle and, just gently discover it and then
Mhm.
choose which one you want to try on your skin, similar to what you were
Mm.
saying before, like different
Yeah.
ways of experiencing fragrance. But
Yeah.
also, how generous is it? I mean, it's got so many
Mm.
of the fragrances from the
Yeah.
collection.
It's a beautiful presentation. So I'm a stickler for detail, and one of
Yes.
my pet peeves is when brands send me their sample kit and it arrives in the mail, and they know that they would have sent hundreds of these things out, and then it arrives, you take the lid off, and the samples have all sort of fallen through the holes, and they're all over the place, and they've leaked. But so I'm a real appreciator of when a sample kit is done well, and it's like investment has been made in terms of the presentation and the quality of the packaging. I think that's really cool, and I think this is a nice
I just
example.
also love Dimitri's passion for ingredient and also
Mm.
incorporating Australian
Yeah,
storytelling, Australian
yeah,
ingredient.
yeah.
Um, it, but in such a non-gimmicky,
Mm.
true artisanal way that, I just really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I really like the deference with which
Mhm.
he approaches each ingredient, but particularly the
Yeah,
Australiana in it.
yeah,
And it's a really lovely way. And I'm so pleased
yeah,
that the world has received it with such open arms because
yeah.
he really delivered it with such style.
I would love to gift this to people. If you have any friends that are not coming home for Christmas and they're Australian but they're overseas, I think this is a beautiful way to bring Australia to them in a nice, neat box.
And there literally is not a bad fragrance in the collection. There is not one that's polarizing. They are
Mhm.
all exquisite and
Yeah.
gorgeous to smell and to wear. Now, you mentioned this brand before, and funnily enough, this was a brand that was offered to me to distribute when I had my company Brand Makers. Um, the person who was the export director for Penhaligon's went over to Amouage and contacted me
Mm.
and said, "Would you like Amouage?" And I
Mm.
actually said no 17 years ago because I don't think Australia was ready for Amouage.
Yeah.
I felt that it was going to be, it was already difficult for Penhaligon's and L'artisan back then.
Yeah.
It was ultra niche. And I said no, but my goodness, how I wish, like I was, Libertine fragrances and I had Amouage now because It is an incredible brand. And
Yeah.
look at this super gorgeous discovery set. It's a little baby,
Hmm.
but here she is. I would love to get this. I'm glad that I have it. But
Okay.
how beautiful is this? And it's got this sleeve as well, a very, very pretty sleeve.
Yeah.
I'll show you.
I feel like
Of the
everything Mirage does visually is just amazing. Like, yeah, perfect.
So it's the
Uh,
Secret Garden collection, and it just goes like this. Tell me about Amouage and about this collection specifically.
but
What do you love about it?
look, I love the evolution of Amouage, and as you say, I don't think Australia would have been ready for that for this brand at the time. The brand has done incredibly well to sort of gradually build its presence here in Australia, and I think obviously this is a lot due to Nick Smart and Agence de Parfum. It also came at a time where now people want these big sort of fragrances that are going back to those times where when you wear a fragrance, people know that you're wearing Amouage. And there's a lot of, I think, desire for people to have these, bigger, bolder fragrances. And typically this brand, which is from Oman and really was, created in the 80s under the care of the Sultanate of Oman. And he was sort of like, I want Oman to be on the world map for
The
perfume.
mat?
And we have frankincense, we're world leaders in Omani frankincense is sort of one of the most beautiful qualities of frankincense you can get in the world. And so that was sort of the goal of Amouage from the beginning. And it sort of evolved into this, very luxurious Omani brand. And now under the creative care of Renaud Salman, who's their sort of creative director, and he's sort of really bringing the brand into a new era after Christopher Chong. I just love it. Like everything's so like the visuals, the storytelling, the fragrances, everything is amazing. So this idea of the secret garden. I love they're more I would sort of say so it's a very floral collection. So I think again perfect for summer if you're wanting something that's playful and fun and
But they're
light.
long lasting. Like if
Yeah,
you want a
yeah,
fragrance that's long lasting, Amouage is definitely they've
yeah.
mastered that
They
art.
have, yeah.
I don't have it here, but
Mhm.
Penhaligon's has a great discovery set. I've given that as a
Mm.
gift lots and lots of times.
Yeah,
Everyone loves Penhaligon's, and
yeah.
it's a great discovery set. Joe Malone has a cute little discovery set as well.
Yeah, I
It's a
haven't
great
seen.
little stocking. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's got four, I want to say it's got
Oh,
four
yeah.
little miniatures,
Yeah.
little vials in it. It's very nice. I once received a fabulous city discovery set from Le Labo, and I think
Yeah.
they only do it once a year.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's one to look out for. So I love this idea, if we're talking about niche and exclusive niche within niche, the city exclusives, literally the name of the
Yes.
collection from La Labo. So you have to travel to each of these cities to buy that particular fragrance in the collection. But every September, they have the set that comes out that you can purchase from all of their boutiques around the world or selected boutiques around the world. And then in October, you can buy a full bottle. The stores will be stocked with the juice and they can blend any one of those fragrances. So it's a nice thing if you unfortunately aren't traveling to one of those cities, your favorite city for the collection, then you can pick it up. You have to wait though every year. It
Yeah,
happens.
but I love that. I love that exclusivity. I love the anticipation. I love the fact that it's not a throwaway
Yeah.
thing. And then the other one that I've just received, and I'm so excited to explore, like I could not
Mm.
believe my luck, and I'm
Hmm.
dying for you to tell me more about it, is this because I am deep on the fragrance talk, and
Mm.
I keep hearing about this
Nishan, yes.
beautiful brand. And when Lily and I go to Libertine Fragrances, we've got a day set aside for Nishan because there's a lot to discover. But can I just show
Absolutely.
you this discovery set? How
Mm.
cool is this?
So cool.
It makes me
It's
so happy.
yeah. I had the fortune of meeting the two founders sort of at the start of their journey when the brand was very young, and we had this amazing connection. One thing I find about fragrance is that there's so many amazing people that work in this industry, and everyone's so loyal. It's cute, huh?
So cute.
It's one of these industries where it's global, but it's still very small, and so you make friends with someone on the other side of the world and you remain friends. And so with Mert and Murat, who created this brand, so they're based in Istanbul. I see them sort of twice a year through the trade shows, but they are the most wonderful guys. I couldn't, and I'm not just saying that, but just the loveliest men, and so humble and grateful that their brand which I don't think, I'm not sure that they would even think that they would be where they are today. They celebrated 10 years, their 10-year anniversary for the brand last year, and had, a huge celebration, bringing all of the people that have been on that journey with them together, and we had an amazing celebration for them. And I love the collection. Now they're working with some of the best perfumers in the world, Julian Rasquinet, Alberto Morillas, like all of these big global superstar perfumers are now wanting to work with them. Was when they started, it was really they had Jorge Lee and a couple of small local perfumers in Istanbul that they were working with. So the cool thing about the collection too, because they don't sort of regularly discontinue things, is that you have this whole range of these, kind of more raw, very artisanal fragrances that are from their earlier days to sort of the more recent launches, which, kind of really feel like the oud that Dominique Ropion did for them is amazing in one of the fragrances. I'm trying to recall the name, but yeah, it's a really cool collection and really nice that it's really put Istanbul on the map. And now I'm seeing a lot of new brands popping up from Istanbul, but it's all due to these guys having success with what they were doing.
But I think that's also wonderful. We talk about inclusivity, we talk about representation, and,
Mhm.
fragrance really used to be the domain of the French, and then the Italians were also well
Yeah,
regarded in fragrances. But now there is truly global representation, and a niche has been I guess the unifier of that. There are many, many countries where the raw ingredients came from, and yet they weren't recognized as potentially a fragrance hub or a
yeah,
country that was able to deliver sophisticated fragrances. Dimitri proved that with Australia. Australia's long been a resource for the fragrance industry, but not celebrated as a destination or as an originator of fine fragrance. And I think, you talk about Turkey. Turkey's renowned for its beauty, its elegance. The Turkish people love to dress up, like they celebrate fragrances. They've got a lot of raw ingredients as well. Same with Iran. So many roses are sourced from Iran.
yeah. It's
And
true.
yet,
I was going to
even
say the Ottoman Empire, they invented steam distillations. The whole industry has this to owe to the ancestors of Turkey.
yeah, and I just remember like growing up, like neroli, rose water, herb waters, mint
Yeah,
distillations,
yeah,
like they're just part of your cultural upbringing. Scents and flavors are part of it. And I think the houses that are, like Amouage that's able to capture something from Oman,
yeah,
that it wouldn't be the go-to first destination. And even Penhaligon's for London,
yeah.
beyond toilet water, they went into fragrance, fine fragrance. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, it is, and I like that point that you made around sort of diversity, and I know it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but it's so true in fragrance where even if you have French perfumers creating for these brands, it's ultimately the brand that's deciding what goes in the bottle, and they're sort of setting the tone and giving the perfumer direction in
Mm.
terms of where they want to go with things. So I still find that you are, even though it might be a French perfumer working with a brand that's outside of France, you'll still get a feeling of something that isn't a classic French perfume. And you definitely, when you smell the Nichane fragrances, you won't find that never would have been done by a French brand. If you as you smell those fragrances, even though a lot of them are created by French perfumers, it's really there's an essence of the Turkish culture which is sort of
And I bet
infused.
I'm going to love more than the couple that I know
Mhm.
because I am Iranian. And I would say that I'm going to find things that resonate with me kind of at a subliminal level in this
Mm.
brand
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
quite close and,
yeah.
culturally, food, scent, smell.
Mhm.
I'm sure I'll find some things. I want to circle back before we finish. I could speak to you for honestly another 2 hours, but I do want to circle back to something that you raised, which was ultra niche fragrance collections within the bigger brand. And you talked about Chanel. I know Giorgio Armani's got the Privé collection. When I was overseas, I was at Cosmoprof recently at
Mm.
Sephora. I got to really play with and discover the Loewe
Yeah,
collection. And what else was there? Oh, Van Cleef& Arpels had
yeah,
quite a
yeah,
broad niche fragrance collection. And then there was another one. My favorite in that category is Galan. And
yeah,
I've just discovered Celine as well. I went
yeah.
into David Jones and I had a really beautiful experience. A young
Mm.
gentleman who was serving me there, he took me on a full fragrance journey.
Mhm.
And they've got a beautiful collection.
I love the Celine fragrances. Two of my recent favorites would be Fendi. Fendi is back in the fragrance game, so they have an
I
exclusive.
used to wear Fendi, the
Yeah,
dark
remember
one.
Fendi? Yeah.
Fendi,
Oh, yeah.
Fendi.
Yes. Yeah, that was amazing. And then Bottega Veneta have just come back with their own collection. So they've got a new
I
collection, which is
went and discovered that too. I
oh,
went to the
what did you
boutique
think?
last week with the amazing bottles.
Oh, yeah, the sort of Murano inspired sculptural art.
Amazing bottles.
Yeah, very cool. And the marble base, very, very cool. Those are probably two of my favorite new sort of collections in that luxury space where I'm just like, okay, someone really thought about this and they really got it right.
And what about, I'm going to talk about two brands that I love for their skincare.
Mm.
And I think that they've done really beautiful fragrances as well. One is Sisley.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think of that, but they've got fine fragrance. I mean, Eau de Campagne and Eau de
Mm.
Soie are stunning,
Yes.
complex,
Yeah.
gorgeous fragrances. I saw that they've done a limited edition of Eau de Soie for Christmas with a Parisian inspired bottle. And
Oh,
God, that fragrance is stunning. My
yeah.
goodness, it's stunning.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of, so say, Eau de Campagne, like love
Ugh,
again, Jean-Claude Elena. So not to sort of, kind of connect dots, but I feel like as you're aware of Cartier Declaration from Cartier,
I
so
know that. I did know this.
and then also Hermes. So Jean-Claude Elena eventually moved to Hermes. He was their in-house perfumer. So the Hermescence collection, many of those are his. Now we have Christine Nagel. But yeah, so many of these luxury collections. And I love it. I think one thing I'm finding interesting too is that as fashion is going through this sort of overhaul where designers and creative heads are moving around, it happens in perfume as well. So interesting to sort of see how collections are taken away, and Fendi being an example where the company sort of changed into a different direction. They removed the fragrances, now they're back. The Fendi family literally had a big role in playing, and so each of those fragrances is dedicated to one of the family members. Kim Jones is considered family, so he has a fragrance in that collection which is sort of really about his personality. So yeah, I think it's there's a lot to explore.
So, if
Mm.
we are now going to stumble into David Jones or Perfumes at a Chemist Warehouse or Mecca Cosmetical, who have got an
Mm.
exquisite curation, by the way, of fragrances. And I went and played with the new Troye Sivan
Yeah.
fragrances there. They were
Like,
really unusual. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if I'd wear any of them, but I loved what he'd done with it, and I loved the audacity of them. I thought they were
Yeah.
amazing.
And I like some of the
Um,
bold, some of the sculptural elements as well.
yes,
The
yes.
candles and the incense. I think it's incense or the oil. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
all of
I
those.
thought they were really interesting, and
Mm.
I loved it. I love Eccentric Molecules at
Yeah.
over at Mecca. That's
Mhm.
a great brand. I love the fragrances from Le Renew's L'Eau d'Italie.
Cute.
That collection is
Yeah.
beautiful. I met the founders. I wear the
Mhm.
perfume. It reminds me of the hotel. It's and
Yeah.
travel. Um,
Wow.
okay, it's a lot. We've talked just in
Mhm.
this one conversation. We have zigzagged to blockbusters, American fragrances that Michael Edwards talked about, French fragrances, designer fragrances, celebrity fragrances. What would be your rule of thumb in finding a new fragrance for yourself? If you could help us kind of make it a little bit easier.
Mhm. That's the $1 million question. Yeah.
Help me.
Yeah. Look, I like your approach with your daughter. I think that's a really sensible way of not going in and thinking that you're going to smell a whole store, but just
Mm.
dedicating a little bit time by time exploring. Perfume should always be fun, so I think the moment that it feels like it's a chore and you're forcing yourself to try and find something, I mean, I guess it's a little bit like maybe a partner where if you're on apps or if you're in a bar kind of going, why won't where's my partner, it's not going to happen. But the moment it becomes fun and the magic happens. So I think perfume is a little bit like that as well. It should always be a fun experience exploring, and the moment it isn't, stop. But probably the questions I mean, people always ask me to define them a fragrance, knowing that I work in the industry. So when friends do that, my first question is always, tell me 3 fragrances that you've worn in the past that you like. And then that'll give me a sense of the style or the family, the olfactive family of the fragrances. So if they've only loved florals, particularly white florals, so tuberose, jasmine, orange blossom, then that's sort of going to be my lead to sort of say, well, maybe you should try, of course, because I know the fragrances. So then I'd be like, maybe you should go to this brand because I think this brand aligns with your lifestyle. And here's, 3 recommendations, which are white florals as well that you should smell. So that can be a way to sort of wayfind, is going off fragrances that you've liked before. Another question, which is sort of more of a modern question in the way that we consume fragrance, is do you want that fragrance to smell similar to what you've worn in the past? Or is this a moment in your journey where you just want to go crazy and go, actually, I've done that. I want to try something new. And then that way it's about going, okay, I'm going to leave the white florals there. Like maybe I should explore something that's woody or, fresh and citrus for the summer. So you can kind of play on this idea of contrast, or are you going to go for something that you want to, you've liked in the past? So those are some of the questions. But I think, fragrance, it should be, again, a constant journey rather than sort of waiting for these moments. And of course, Christmas is a lovely time to go off and do this. But after Christmas, like, go back in February, go back in March, go back as the season change. And there's always new fragrances being launched. But, that's part of the joy of it, is every time I walk through a department store or I'm in the city, just to drop into the perfumeries and be like, what's
I've
new?
made friends with the with different people, and
Yeah,
it definitely has guided the journey and it's made it
yeah,
better. And you go to places like Libertine Perfume where the staff are so passionate and they're delightful and they're specialists. And they were
yeah,
so kind to us, like that, each of them have their own favorite brands, and they came and told us the story and took us on a journey. And that definitely helps. Like, it's like having an expert with you. Or
yeah,
Esther over at Galan in David Jones Elizabeth Street. She and I spent a couple of hours together once, for me to find my perfect Galan fragrance from the collection. And every time I go past, I do like her to kind of introduce me to one that's a little bit outside of my comfort zone, not in the families that I normally buy in. And
yeah,
and that's been fun too. So I think you're right, having that a base to start from, but
yeah.
taking a few little steps to the
Yeah,
side.
yeah. And I think as well, there's no, often when I'm talking with friends, I can see in their face the stress of, oh, I could get it wrong. It's like, it's just
Mm.
perfume. Like you can't get it wrong. If you smell something that you don't like, then you don't wear that and you go somewhere else and you try something new. So I think that's one thing. Another, maybe some homework, if I can give your listeners some homework, is
Please.
if this is all new for them, and this is the first time they have sort of, the thought has been planted in their head of like, oh, like, let me go and explore some new things, go, depending on your generation, but go to Chemist Warehouse or go to David Jones or go to Maya and retrace your perfume steps and smell the 10 fragrances that you've worn throughout your life that have meant something to you, and revisit them and like get reacquainted, and then sort of see what sparks your interest from those fragrances. Is there something in common with all of them? Or maybe it's just that they're beautiful memories in themselves. And it might be that you go and buy and wear one of those fragrances again. Or it might sort of trigger a thought to then launch and go into something that's new that you've never worn before.
That is a great idea. I think I've been doing that subconsciously, but I'm going to do it a bit more intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because, to add to a question that you've led us down this journey with, I would like to offer one question that you could ask yourself, whether you're buying fragrance for yourself or giving it as a gift. And that's, how do you want to feel? Because I think
Yeah,
fragrance makes you feel something in
yeah,
addition to making you smell a certain way or project something. It also
yeah,
makes you feel something. And I think that that's the fun of talking about fragrance. It's the fun
mhm,
of smelling fragrance. It's the fun of giving and receiving fragrance, is that it
yeah,
does change your feeling state. And I like that.
yeah. It's true. It's true. And, and emotions, there's a broad range of emotions. And I know for me, there's fragrances that I wear, if I've got a busy schedule of meetings and, naturally I'm an introvert, so I need a lot of time to recharge after I've been very social. And so there's fragrances that I wear that almost are my kind of protection. And it's not about me feeling confident, but it's just sort of feeling that I'm in my comfort zone and feeling
Mm,
kind of like I have a little bit of a force field around me. So yeah,
sure.
fragrance doesn't always have to be, I want to feel attractive or I want to feel, desirable, but it can make you feel a whole range of emotions. And so yeah, I think
Have you seen, I'm sure you've seen, what am I saying? Have you seen, going back to Galan and their amazing collection of fragrances, they have a baby fragrance, which I used to wear, called Mon Petit Galan.
yeah,
It's a citrus. It's so heavenly.
yeah,
Honestly, it's just the most comforting smell on the planet. But
mhm,
they also have a fragrance you wear to bed. I think it's called
yeah,
Parfum de Lit.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and they've got a couple. couple of different ones for different lifestyle moments, speaking
Hmm.
exactly to what you were saying, like a
Yeah,
wind down. It's more than aromatherapy, it's fine fragrance.
yeah,
And I love that concept.
yeah, yeah. I because I love perfume, so there's a lot of fragrances which are very classically feminine that I probably wouldn't wear out in public, but I still love to smell. And so for me, Chanel Number 5 was always my bedtime fragrance. And it may not necessarily be on my body, it might just be on my pillow or sort of just in the room or, using the body oil. But those sorts of smells are really, yeah, it's important to sort of have those moments where you're exploring fragrance in your day in different ways.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I want to thank you so much. I'm so excited to explore my new
Mm,
sets as
yeah.
well. So this is going to be my summer of trying different feelings, trying different scents. Is there, if you had to pick a favorite child for this summer that you're going to wear, have you chosen a fragrance for this summer?
I'm in the process.
Oh,
Yeah, so I was wearing so this last weekend I was wearing a brand from France called Orme, which used to be I think they're having a little bit of a hiatus from Australia, but I have a feeling they'll be back. But it was an all natural kind of fragrance brand, beautiful bottles. So they have a fragrance called Toy Toy Toy, and there's a new extrait that they launched. So I've been wearing that, and I love it. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. There's about 5 fragrances that are kind of vying for my attention for the summer, and I haven't quite
oh,
made my mind up. And they're all very different. So I haven't quite figured out in my head what the mood is for the summer. Um, but this is the excitement of it.
it is the excitement of it. It is
Um,
the possibility of it.
yeah, yeah.
Clayton, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm
Okay.
just so happy we had this conversation, and fragrance made me a new friend. So it's
Yeah,
wonderful to just sit
always.
with you and to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel, sign up for our free newsletter, and consider leaving a review and rating it. This really helps the channel grow and reach new audiences.